So I want to welcome Chip Dodd on the podcast. I'm so excited to have you on here, Chip. I told somebody the other day, I said I could have Dr. Fauci, I could have Trump or Oprah, and I'd say give me Chip Dodd every day of the week. So,
oh, wow.
That's sincere.
Listen, man, I love that. That is super humbling.
Give me Dodd or give me death. Dr. Dodd is a great.
Hey, man, I tell you what, that's some sweet stuff to deliver. I'm your guy for sure.
You're my guy for sure. So Dr. Dodd, author of 7 books, counselor, mentor, doctor, coach, been in the addiction world for what, 20, 30 something years?
Yeah, 30 years before
30 years.
Moving into the advancing wellness stage of my life.
Love it.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking the time. I'm really glad you had me on. I know the folks that get this will get a lot of value out of it. And the main thing, the Voice of the Heart book, that's one of the, is that the first book you wrote?
Yes, that's the first book that kicked everything off. In fact, Ben, for those people who are going to get the book or have read the book, in the introduction, I talk about sort of an experience I had in 1991. And so where this guy in the book had gone through a very traumatic experience. I got invited by the hospital to come work with him. And that's where I ended up discovering what became the Badlands metaphor about how to walk with people. And so he was an impetus for me writing The Voice of the Heart 10 years later. And then I just got a message from his wife, because I've known the guy off and on for years, that he just passed away April 7th, 2020, very peacefully in his sleep.
Wow.
And it's amazing the power of love and care and serving, because this man went from death to life, from hopelessness to hope, from really not seeing himself how much he mattered to really never recognizing how much he left behind. This guy was a spur that triggered me into writing the book.
And I don't want to give the story away, but his wife found him hanging in the barn, I think,
yes.
Trying to commit suicide.
Yes. In fact, he died in the noose, and his wife shoved him out of the noose, and paramedics resuscitated him, and he went on to have 30 extraordinary years after that. And I just did a podcast about his life, sort of the backstory to that day that couldn't go in the book. His marriage afterwards, just a beautiful man, really. And you know what, being a simple man, he was just as like, he was not very well in terms of he wasn't a professional, super educated. He was simple, but he was had tremendous impact with others in life. To me, that's the ultimate, is just to leave behind things in people's hearts, so.
Yeah, and the fact that it spurred this book, and I've told people this multiple times, that there's 2 books in my life that have made the most impact, and it's that Voice of the Heart book, and it's the Bible. And I really truly believe that.
Wow.
With every ounce of my soul, because, and like I've heard you say before, it turned my world upside right. The world, that life I was living, the way I was taught to believe that feelings were weak, and that if you had feelings, you had a real badness about you.
Yes.
It just really changed everything I really thought I believed about the world and about marriage and about my own spiritual journey and just relationship in general. So
that book, I was introduced, this is so funny, but I was introduced to feelings back in 87, 88. I used to, when I was a kid, I had this motto that was be strong in body, mind, and spirit, somehow that was the way to control life and be strong in life and prove yourself and be worth something. And I never included the word heart.
No.
That was the feelings and heart. Those were weaknesses. I did not know that was the doorway to strength.
Right.
Amazing.
Talk to us about that a little bit, because I know we're in this era, this time of fear with COVID-19 and unemployment. And I know I'm more anxious than I've been in years. And a lot of that anxiety was dealt with based on the work I did around your book and your program. But my hands have been sweatier. I've been wanting to bite my fingernails lately. And I think a lot of it stems from my fear around all this madness that's going on that we just can't seem to get away from, and we don't seem
Yeah,
to get
yeah,
to. So talk to
absolutely.
us about fear.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Well, a couple of things, Ben. One, uh, that we humans, and the neuroscientists have caught up with what you and your field have been doing for years in some ways. And the neuroscientists have caught up also with, which is funny, what ancient scriptures, the Holy Scriptures, the Bible has been telling us forever and ever and ever, if it's read with an eye of neediness, and is that human beings are created as emotional and spiritual creatures, created to live fully. In fact, everything that has DNA, everything that has life in it is seeking fulfillment. And we human beings are doing the same thing. We're created to seek full life. But human beings can't have full life unless they're living fully in relationship with how we're created, me with myself, with others, and God. And then we end up, creating out of that. But so we literally are created for relationship. And if we don't know how to do that, we can't. So, and neuroscientists are now clearly pointing that human beings find fulfillment. They call it through social connection. And then social contentment, which means I'm bonded with others and I'm secure in those relationships. And if you don't have that, you're going to find it another way. I mean, it's clear as the sun rising, and they're confirming that you're going to find it one way or another. If you don't find it in a genuine way, you will find it in a counterfeit way. And a lot of anxiety has to do with not trusting relational connections or not having them. Okay. So if you're an emotional and spiritual creature, you've been given the capacity to feel feelings, tell the truth about them, let yourself be known related to them, and be cared for by others who can join you in it and God. So feelings are there to render us I want to say render us vulnerable, but really render us open and in need of connection for strength.
And I'm glad you mentioned that word vulnerability, because I had a real tough time with that early on, that, fear gives us strength and that vulnerability is actually the ultimate, source of power. So there's a couple things I want to ask you. Talk about how fear gives us strength. And I think we're thinking that's through vulnerability. And then that wisdom begins its creation through fear.
Fear, okay. Yeah, so, especially if you look at the voice of the heart, there's this chart in the book, but God has given us, or you could even say creation or life has given us 8 feelings that allow us to live fully in a place that's rough. The way I really like to say it is we've been given 8 tools to live fully in a tragic place. And one of the 8 tools that we've been given is fear. And fear is a feeling that allows us, and it's there for the purpose of identifying danger. And it's there to put us in a position of crying out, reaching out towards that which will help us, rescue us, strengthen us, aid us, bring succor to us, teach us, and show us the direction we need to go. So fear is a feeling that we've been given that allows us to cry out. But when a person has fear and they use it like it's created to be used, that renders a person vulnerable. It exposes their need.
Scary.
So people who become anxious, because anxious is one step removed from fear. It's the physiology of the body trying to do what the heart is made to do. Like when I would get anxious growing up, man, I knew one thing: to be strong in body, mind, and spirit, hit the road running.
No fear.
Run. The harder you run, the stronger you get, the farther you are away from fear.
That's right.
It's anxiety. And man, I tell you what, if you run, anxiety goes away.
Yeah.
But for a while, it's gone. And and that's where people, as you know, they can become addicted to exercise or alcohol. I mean, it kind of works similarly in terms
Anything that moves me away from what I'm feeling inside, I guess, is essentially a drug.
It's really true. So So feelings aren't our enemy. They're really to our benefit, because when I cry, it allows me to connect, to join, to find a solution. And hey, Ben, what's amazing is even when a child is born, I just put out a podcast Monday that talks about the APGAR.
Yeah.
We talked about that before, that when a little baby's born, the medical people check to see, will the baby cry out?
Mm-hmm.
Will the baby reach out? And then will the baby take in sustenance?
Yep.
And these little creatures, they're not having a lot of brain activity. They're all heart activity.
All heart.
And that birthright, that birth inheritance never goes away. And feelings are indicative of how we're created. And so we learn how to hide our feelings instead of being grown up to being shown how to express our feelings.
That's so true.
Yeah.
That really connected the dots for me, because, you know, I still couldn't break away from the fact that fear wasn't in some way some kind of weakness, that loneliness wasn't some kind of a badness, and hurt didn't mean that I just need to suck it up and get over it. But when you look at a baby's born with the ability to hurt, the ability to have sadness, the ability to have a lot of anger. So we would never in a million years say that baby's wrong or that baby's doing something bad. They're baby's being who he's made to be.
Yeah,
So,
expressing need for connection and need for the sustenance that's going to strengthen me to grow into who I'm made to be by starting with how I'm made. And so fear is a feeling that allows me to reach out for help, allows me to hope and reach, which is acknowledging vulnerability. And then amazingly, when we hope plus risk, ask for help, and we receive the help we need, what's amazing about that is we develop this thing that we were actually born with already, but we develop faith.
Mm.
And we become sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see.
It's the Hebrews.
Help will arrive. The rescue will come. God is here. God will come back. God who was bidden or unbidden, God is present. I mean, we end up reaching out. And then when we don't receive what we were looking for, we become sad or we're angry or we're lonely. And we're still created to stay in the cry out. Mm. So anyway, so fear is a feeling that actually develops the beginnings of faith.
So then what do I do with it? So if I'm sitting on my couch watching the news all day long and I'm looking at my 401k and, you know, I'm worried my Aunt Betty's going to be sick because she's got cancer, you know, what do I do with that fear? Like, what's the practical?
And you know what's amazing about that? That watching the news all day, continuing to check our 401ks is understandable because we have a need to know what's happening. That is simply a reasonable awareness. But what we've got to realize also is that just like people who sell liquor, this is an essential business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You started.
Yeah. So when people sell alcohol, well, people also selling news. It's a commodity. And what drives a lot of the industries to continue to make profit is that they keep people anxious and they make them addicted to keeping up with what's happening so that you'll never be fooled. And that's what anxiety is. It's being hyper aware of the little twigs cracking in the forest, never going to sleep so the lion never gets you. So if we spend a lot of time binging on the 401k, binging on the news, keeping it going on in our heads all the time, all it does, it increases our anxiety, makes us more desperate, and makes us not able to use fear properly.
But why is that such an addictive thing? Even though we know we don't feel better when we're doing it, and we know that we don't feel better after we're doing it, but it seems so addictive in the moment. And I catch myself doing it too.
Absolutely. And you know what? Those of us who are anxious, and I get it, man. I get anxiousness. What it is and this is going to sound odd, but people who are really anxious were never allowed or supported in being afraid. Does it make sense?
Totally.
They never were allowed to be lonely, to say, I'm lonely or I'm afraid, help me. Like, I remember when we had, a series of tornadoes that came through, Murfreesboro. And I remember we had a pretty bad tornado that came through. The hail hit the house. I mean, and we had like we and the family were kind of in this room. Well, later on, about a month later, another series of storms came through, and I was watching the news, and my son William, a little bitty guy, about 8 years old at the time, was kind of pulling on my pants, kind of trying to grab my hand. I'm watching the news, and he said, "Daddy, hey, Daddy, we're gonna have a storm? Is it gonna be a tornado? It's gonna be a tornado." And I kind of took my hand and moved his hand away from my pants. I said, "Son, I'm watching." I'm, like, stop. And then once I gathered data, I turned around to answer him. He was gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh man, what have I just done? It's like he was being needy.
Yeah.
He was asking for help. He said, "Daddy, will you pray? Daddy, will you pray?" And he was saying, the kid was really scared. He was doing exactly what fear created him to do. And then I went to him afterwards, said, "William, I'm so sorry, And he was kind of like, "Yeah, that's fine, Dad. It's okay." I had put him in a position to withdraw by hurt. He was being exposed and needy and vulnerable. And I shooed him away in my own need for control.
Yeah.
So that's what happens. People who are really anxious are actually people who were never allowed to use and develop the tools that they were given by birth to grow up into being able to stay connected in the midst of danger, difficulty, loss, joy.
Yeah.
Even joy, Ben, we withhold joy. I mean, because we're taught never to get too excited,
I'd rather tell somebody how bad I feel versus how lucky and blessed I am.
Yeah, because you tell somebody you feel too good, they're like, "Oh yeah, right, you're the king, right?" Yeah. Also, you get resented and people hate you for doing well,
Totally.
But you asked about wisdom. That when a person begins to be able to trust the process of life, they also begin to be able to learn how to do life. And wisdom is ultimately about kind of like getting the sense of intuitively knowing what to do. Wisdom is like timing. It's like there's a time to dance, a time to sit, a time to weep, a time to gather, the circle of life, Ecclesiastes, a time to mourn, a time to have joy. They have a sense of empathy. People who have fear and do it well learn about life, develop faith, and then they develop this sort of sense of empathy. Like they get how people can be like them and they can care about others. They become empathic, they become compassionate, they become like, they trust creation and creativity, and they also have a willingness to serve others. So isn't it amazing, Ben, that fear is the birthplace of our capacity to serve others?
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by fear strengthens us.
I love that.
Does that make sense? Because you and I talk about this, a lot of times we talk to people, they go, "Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, dude. Just give me my Xanax. I'm going for a run. I'm done."
What the heck are they talking about anyway? So here's a practical application, if you will. I'll let you work me for a moment. So I'm really struggling between, that side of me that's empathetic and really doesn't want people to get sick and doesn't want people to die. And, I see the destruction. I get it. Like there's that part of me that totally understands. And there's another side of me that I'm struggling with. There's a lot of anger for the injustice that's going on, where you can't trust what people are saying on the media. It's coming in all different directions. Everybody, when Oxford and Johns Hopkins are arguing about the numbers, how am I ever going to know?
Yeah.
Right? So you have Dr. Fauci saying we should never shake hands ever again. I mean, that's been a cultural tradition since 500 BC. You're saying that, Bill Gates says everybody should be mandated vaccine before we ever go back to church or ever go back to school. So I'm really struggling to balance out those two polarities, the two sides of me that wants to be empathetic, but yet there's an injustice that, people are being lied to, and people are being told that like their body's not able to fight off a virus, and that their best protection is to stay at home and slather themselves in hand sanitizer. And I'm not teaching my daughter to live that way. So how do I reckon that?
You broke up right there. You back?
Yeah, I'm here.
Again? Yeah. You said hand sanitizer.
You lost me a hand sanitizer?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
lather myself in hand sanitizer. Yeah, that was the last thing I got. But yeah,
Yeah, so I don't want my daughter to grow up in a world that she thinks, or that I model for her, that the only defense she has in this world is to separate and distance herself from other people, and
yeah,
cover herself in hand sanitizer
yeah.
and not ever
Ben,
shake hands.
there's a, you and I use science every day, and we have to be able to trust information from others, which is, of course, about relationships. So we've got to gather data and information, but we're still the ones who decide unless we live in a communist or fascist world, right? And this is mainly for people who believe that there is a greater source of power than science, what I'm about to say.
Yeah.
Okay. And because if all I believe in is science, I'm going crazy right now. I mean, like when Oxford, Edinburgh, Stanford, Johns Hopkins are all giving us different things. And I think something that's been really amazing is instead of increasing centralization during this time, the present administration is paying attention to what we've always called states' rights, or federalism, I think it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they're saying is that I believe that in your community, you have a reference point to know what you need in your community.
Right.
So based on that, you give us information and tell us how we can help. So from that context, that's kind of like the smaller the platoon, the more wisdom we have about what we need. Like in Hickory, North Carolina, you don't have to oversee the water resources like you do in Phoenix, Arizona.
Right.
So the centralization, just like global application to certain areas. Right. So from that standpoint, one is we need to address everything around us based upon what we're experiencing around us, and then also using information from other resources and kind of do the best we can in that sense.
Yeah.
But if we have a power in our lives greater than science, community, care, and so on, but if you're a believer, a God believer, this is what we who are believers in God can do, but this is what we have. Number one is, if we're believers, we know that we as Christians are promised that we stand on a foundation, that we have a God who will never leave nor forsake us. That's a promise. So those promises are based on processes and plans. So God has a plan, he has a process, and he has promises. And his plans and processes bring fulfillment of his promises. So we as Christians, we're promised that we're going to be delivered. Now, deliverance doesn't mean that you're not going to have troubles. It means that you can walk in faith amidst the troubles. Because, back during the plagues in the Roman era, when everyone was running from Rome, the Christians, in many ways, who were trapped there anyway, they went towards the plague. They went towards helping. They went towards caring, right? So anyway, we're going to be delivered from whatever is happening around us. We're going to be delivered through what's happening around us. In other words, like we will walk through it and somehow we'll walk through the valley of the shadow of death and we'll be okay. Or we're going to be delivered through to it. So from it, through it, or to it. And to it means that we're going to get sick and we may wind up dying. But man, every single person in this life is delivered to what happens in life. We're all going to die. And I don't mean to be cavalier. But what I'm trying to say is that this coronavirus has put us in a position of having to face how we live every day. It's just that this is global and a pandemic, but we've been living in epidemics.
Sure.
And we've been living in individual experiences of falling off ladders and car crashes. It's just that it's not a global car crash. So therefore, we don't see ourselves as affected, but everybody's affected by life all the time.
Right.
So number one, we're promised deliverance if we have faith and walk in that relational faith. Number two is that we need to remain connected. because we're in an era of, it's like we're almost being shoved to move into the remote, remote everything. Like you and I aren't sitting down together looking at each other. And we probably could, if we put in the effort, drive to a park and do this with 6 feet away from each other,
Oh, for sure.
which would be better. Yeah. But we need to really work on staying connected, because contact is remote, and remote means removed, and removed means isolated. Because I really fear about what's going to happen with our new economy of remote work.
Sure.
Because it really does mean removed. Now, I get there's a benefit because you're at home and you have the comfort, but eventually it's not going to be enough. You need to find your neighbors.
Right.
So we need to stay connected relationally by telling each other what's going on with us emotionally.
Right.
Okay.
Not just the, hey, how are you doing?
No,
How's the backyard look?
Yeah, it's time, man. There's car crashes and pandemics, and 100,000 people died of alcoholism last year.
Yeah.
Because we're in so much denial, it was a blip.
Yeah. No, not even mentioned.
Yeah. And I know the corona numbers are growing. We're at 40-something thousand now. I mean, I get it. It's scary and difficult. And so we're delivered. We need to stay connected. And then the third thing has been that we are, a crisis exposes character. It doesn't develop it. And for example, let me just speak to you and your work. Like when this thing hit, you've got all of these anxieties going on. You've got concerns about, your well-being, your practice closing.
Sure.
And then also there's even a really a deeper, richer concern that if your practice closes, definitely you're going to be broke and you're going to be in trouble and the bank's going to call, and you've got all these life terrors to look at, like, oh my God. But then you go, oh my God. But then also you got a deeper thing going on, and you're saying, like, how are people going to get their medicine? The medicine of what you do. And so character is exposed in a crisis, and you're fighting for ways to stay open so that you can continue to bring, like your brand says, it's well, and there's this little smile, this sense of well-being. And you want to serve people to make sure that they keep getting their strength, because through their strength, we all are better off. So at this time, you're actually exposing the character you've developed over the years by fighting to stay open. In spite of the fear, you're willing to fight. And that's the key to this whole thing, I think, that in spite of what we're told, we've got to find ways to bring our fruit to market.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that you do, whatever it is that you have, whatever it is you can offer, now's the time to expose that character and go do it. Because if you keep paying attention to the anxiety of all the things that can happen, you're going to miss what could happen.
That's so
if you'll
true.
stay. Yeah, and by the way, very quickly, my wife and a bunch of people, you've seen it happen everywhere. She and this group of women already had a small group at church where they were sewing for old people and sewing for single mothers, making bibs and clothing and stuff. They switched over to start making masks, and they've made over 1,000 and something masks, and a bunch of, they just sent a load up to New York City. Wow. They're doing it for neighbors and so on. But I took one to a dentist friend, and he said, I wanted the mask because I needed it, and I wanted, from that group. Then he said, I also wanted the mask as a souvenir. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, this will end, and something else will come, but this will end. And I want this as a marker to remember that in a time of crisis, people were still loving, people were still caring, and people more than anything were fighting.
Yeah. Fighting
for something that it was greater than the evil that had approached us, So
I love
that's
that.
A lot, isn't it?
That is a lot.
Yeah, you ask me what time it is, and then we'll go to, I'll tell you how to make a watch.
All right, that's why you're on here.
Yeah, so have your editor kind of like slice and dice.
No. It's all
hey, Ben, your editor looks at you and goes, dude, I'm not sure what we can do with this.
hey, man, I work by the hour, not by the day.
I hope this makes it to your audience so they get like, they go like, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. He knows he's saying this.
We're not cutting any of this out.
Oh, you're very good, man. But I love what you're doing, man. I want to reiterate, This isn't a paid promotion for you. This
No.
is a genuine statement. People like you who can do need to do. See, in spite of the anxiety, you're still being close to people in a very smart way. So you're living what can be done. You know what I'm saying? Because there's a group of people that want to shut you down completely.
For sure.
Which means people don't get their help. So with wise actions and concentrated compassion and lots of prayer, we're going to get through this thing. But people have to fight.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you, Chip. Hey, babe, I'm recording right now. Watch out. Step out. That's my daughter. So that might be one part we need to edit out.
Yes.
All right, honey, I'll be there to help her. She's doing online school, so she still needs a little help with the homework. So.
Oh, that's another thing I've gotten a ton of questions about. It's like, okay, kids, they're everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard that in the homeschool community, two students were expelled for fighting, and one teacher was fired for being drunk. Showing up drunk on the job, so it's going downhill in the headbasket. I guess
the headmaster got a divorce and left.
Yeah, exactly. Headmaster's nowhere to be found.
Yeah, exactly.
And then just kind of how and you kind of alluded to a little bit of this before, but I kind of want to talk about anger, because you talk in the book about how anger is the caring feeling, and it's the most vulnerable feeling, and it's also the most misunderstood feeling.
Yes.
Because growing up, I thought anger meant, ripping picture frames off the wall and, power over, dominance over people. So explain how anger is actually a healthy.
Ben, you and I have even kind of in a real cool way sort of walked all the way through this in a way, because, fear prepares us to be in need. Fear lets us reach for help. And then help trains us to know how to experience life differently without putting ourselves in the same danger, right? So we learn how to live. Now, anger is, definitely misunderstood, but see, because most people think that anger and rage are the same thing.
Yeah.
And rage is terrifying, and rage is wrong.
Right.
Okay. Because what rage does, it's a killer. It destroys anything that threatens who's behind it, right?
Yeah.
But anger is a very vulnerable feeling, because anger, like, for example, let's look at some words that are synonymous with anger, because anger is the reaching out feeling. It's a desire for more and a desire for change. Okay. And so thirst, hunger, yearning, desire, wishing, hoping, wanting. Yeah, these are angry words, because they put us in a position to reach towards that which will fulfill us. So, and yet that renders us vulnerable. That's how come I say anger is the most vulnerable feeling of all the feelings, because it shows what we need and it shows what we care about. So fear gets you ready for battle.
Right.
Anger takes you to it. So as soon as this thing hit, you went, oh my goodness, what just in your local world, you went straight to, what do we need to do? How do we need to care for the people around us? How do we go about doing that? And you were asking scary questions. Okay, well, how, what, where, mask, sterile Clorox, cleaning. And you started finding out ways to get that material, and then it became scarce. And maybe you responded quickly because whatever. So, but you were able to stay open, and you stayed open for a purpose. Fear got you ready for battle. Anger turned the key to the door open. It said, come in. And we're going to be careful, but we're going to fight, because we're going to do whatever we got to do to make sure that you get what you need so you can get well.
Love it.
So, and also you're doing it because I'm going to take care of my family no matter what it takes. And I want to make sure that there's a roof over our head. So fear allows you to go to prayer, allows you to go to mentors. Fear allows you to get help. Fear allows you to grow in faith. Fear allows you to grow in wisdom. And anger is the movement that expresses that faith and wisdom.
So really, anger sounds more like passion than what
it does.
The traditional
definition. And you know, Ben, if your 401k, let's just say you had a 401k and then you had $2.5 million in cash in the bank.
All right, let's pretend for a moment. I'm with you.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna do like a cartoon right now. This is
Let's make it
fantasy,
10
right?
billion.
You make it 10 billion.
I like that better.
Let's go for it. See,
But while we're doing playtime, let's go ahead and make it.
yeah, exactly. What I believe is that you would definitely not have to, but you would probably be willing to continue to help.
Mhm.
Okay. So I want you to know that anger is not just about like coming out of neediness, it's desire, passion, a willingness to be in pain, and that's the gift of anger.
Mhm.
Like the gift of fear is faith and wisdom, the gift of anger is passion.
Yeah.
What you just said, a willingness to be in pain for something that matters more than the pain. And like, because
Man, that's big right there.
it is.
Say that again.
Yeah, passion is a willingness to be in pain for something that matters more than the pain. Like, I mean, there are times you set up and you're sleepy as you can be. You've worked all day. You've expended yourself, and your precious daughter is coughing and hacking. And you'll sit in the chair in a room, like if you're scared and she needs you, and that's passion. A willingness to be in pain for something that matters more than pain. And the ultimate passion that we're willing to be in pain over is love.
Mhm.
Love, care for others, hunger to be loved, loving others, care for family, then care for others outside of family, then care for the community that supports our families, and then care for and the list goes on, expanding ripples.
So I guess what I'm kind of gathering from this is, reach into our heart, touch our fear, speak our fear, and then continue to stay angry about the things that really matter to us in all this. So.
You know what, Ben? You could have saved a whole podcast. There it is. That's brilliant. Yeah. And it's feel our feelings. That's because we have 8. Be able to tell the truth about them because we're made to express them, and then give them to the process. Give them to God, so to speak. God owns the process of life. Another way of saying it really very practically is identify your feelings. What am I feeling? Explore your feelings. Where is it coming from? When did this start? And then the next one is, who do I tell? Express. Identify, explore, express. Because I believe that you're very adept at dealing with your heart and using your brain to apply your heart work, that you run through those keys all the time.
Yeah.
Your feelings, tell the truth, give it to the process. And you've been sharing that with others to their benefit while applying all this other expertise around you. Science. You've been given science, or you're using science to fulfill hearts. Instead of using science to treat people as things and technological creatures.
Yeah, and that's where it's the balance between staying evidence-based and using science versus, ignoring the heart and how God made us too. So for me, the practical application and how I try to do this every day is, I get up every morning and do my quiet time with a cup of coffee, and then really sort of just search with a journal, pen and paper, and just search what's going on inside me. What am I feeling? What of those 8 feelings am I experiencing? And then journaling what's underneath that, and where did that come from, or what experience yesterday brought me to that feeling. And then being able to communicate that with other men. For me, it's other men, just guys that I trust, that I know that love me, that have my best interest at heart, don't want anything from me. They just want to connect with me on that level. So that's kind of my practical application. Don't do it sloppy and do it clumsily, but
we've written a book on like clumsy is as good as we ever get.
I love that.
We're all works in progress. And, I want to emphasize as we close too, Ben, that the feelings that we have are not negatives. They're tools that are positives that really allow us to live fully in a tragic place. And we, with this pandemic, are experiencing in a very acute way what life is like all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, we're powerless over life. And this crisis has put us in a position to use that powerlessness to become empowered. If you run from your feelings, they'll catch you. If you'll go ahead and acknowledge your feelings, they will take you where you go.
It's so true. Love that. So how can we, obviously the Voice of the Heart book, I recommend that as a guidebook for living. Any other way that they can find you or reach you? Website, podcast?
Yeah. Thanks, Ben. Chipdodd.com
Okay.
is my website, and we've got podcasts on there now. Also, there's a Sage Hill. You can look up material on the Sage Hill counseling site too, sagehillcounseling.com.
Mm-hmm.
So for people who are, in need of, just growing in dispelling anxiety, growing in their ability to do fear well, and awakening to sort of some of the sanity of anger, finding the difference between rage and anger. And that place is founded on the spiritual root system, which I developed in the early 90s, when most of the people listening were children. We've grown up.
Yeah.
But Ben, I love what you do, and I want to thank you for what you're doing, and all the people out there who, in spite of the anxiety and in spite of the fear, are marching towards helping others. And you're doing it wisely. But I tell you what, if we listen to the science only, science is objective, which means it doesn't do feelings.
Yeah.
And so science isn't interested in your feelings.
No.
And so we have to work out an integration of both, like you were saying earlier. And the news is selling fear. They're selling anxiety, right?
It's a bestseller right now, too.
Oh man, it's a bestseller. Yeah.
Yeah, all those politicians, doctors, and newscasters they have job security. They're making pretty good living. So keep you glued to the tube and keep you drunken in your chair, and their job is done. So anyway, thanks, Chip. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah. Thank you, Ben. I love getting to do this with you, and look forward to if we didn't run enough people off, we do it again.
The one or two that hang with us will be back.
Yeah. God bless you, man.
Yeah. God bless you. Thanks, Chip.